Good evening all, and welcome to day 4 of Paranormal Week. Tonight for you I have an absolutely chilling collection of ghost stories. I also have the pleasure of welcoming back Blue Spooky, someone I haven't collaborated with in about 9 years, I think. So it's great to have him back. If you like his work, please follow the links to hear more. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was younger, my parents' bedroom had a ceiling fan with a light on it, and both the fan and light could be controlled with a remote. It was a newer model too. You only had to press a button, and everything turned on without having to pull a chain. Well, when Hurricane Wilma hit back in 2005, I was 4 years old at the time, and the fan and light both stopped working. The hurricane was brutal. Rain was slamming against the windows, and the wind was howling outside, and the whole building felt like it was shaking. But after it passed, we noticed the fan and light no longer worked. Naturally, my parents assumed it was water damage, even though we were on the second floor of a 4-floor condominium. There wasn't any visible water in the room, or puddles or stains on the ceiling, but they figured the storm must have gotten in somewhere. My parents didn't feel like paying for an electrician, so they asked my grandfather to come to try and fix it. He had some years of experience as an electrician and was always the person we called for things like this. The man worked for days. He replaced multiple parts, wiring, the motor, the remote receiver, even the light fixture itself. He checked everything. He didn't see any water damage or anything else wrong with it. He couldn't figure out how to turn it on. No matter how much he tried, it just remained dead. He ended up telling my parents just to forget about it, that it was probably a miracle it even worked before, and there was no point wasting more money on it. Well, fast forward about 5 years and my grandfather passes. He had been sick for a while, so it didn't come as a complete shock, but everyone was obviously very shaken. He had been a huge part of our lives, the guy who fixed everything, and the one who always showed up when we needed him, so losing him really hit hard, even though it was not really a surprise. I got home with my parents, and we all showered and then went to bed. I slept in their room at this point since I was still young, and the room was dark. We didn't talk much, we just got under the covers and tried to sleep. But the moment we got in bed, that light turned on. It just clicked on. No remote, no voice, no movement of any kind. It simply came on and stayed on. My dad immediately started crying. He just broke down. My mum and I were staring at it in shock. Neither of us said anything, we just watched it, like if we moved it might go out again. We didn't touch the remote, we didn't say anything to turn it off, it just sort of happened. We never forgot that. Or at least I didn't for the rest of my life. The moment that light came on and the way my dad cried, it really felt like he had come back, not only just to fix the light, but to tell us that he was okay. I have an encounter that happened to me when I was 4. My parents have also had their own encounters within the same location. We used to live in an old farmhouse in southern Indiana before moving in town where I started going to school. A bunch of random things would happen, mostly things getting knocked over or pushed. But one night I remember vividly. I had a toy that was precious to me at the time, a Billy Blaze's Rescue Hero action figure that had a backpack with a squirt gun built in. He had glow-in-the-dark bands around his hands and boots. My parents had a crib bed they kept me in, and it was in a separate room to theirs. Apparently my mum disagreed with my dad because she had incidents where she was pushed in that room, but my dad ignored her and decided to keep the crib in there regardless. I can remember holding that toy while I was trying to sleep, and it kept getting colder in the room. There was moonlight shining in the room, and I saw a green face floating above me grinning. It ripped the toy out of my hands and held it over me. Despite seeing no hands, You could tell that it was doing that to bully me because I liked my rescue heroes. I can remember crying and screaming until my parents opened the door and the face disappears and dropped the Billy Blazes on my face. I slept with my parents in their bed until we moved after that. Years later, my mum told me quite a bit about what happened at the farmhouse. She claimed there were two different ghosts within the house, the green one and the farmer. We had no idea who the green one was, but she had seen the same grinning face on several occasions herself. The farmer, however, was much kinder and seemed confused. I don't remember him, but apparently both my parents had seen him. Supposedly he was murdered on the property by his wife, who shoved him into a well where he drowned. The well on the property was sealed off with concrete when the water was provided by the city. There is a lot more that I haven't mentioned here. I'll ask my parents again and see if they remember more though. When I was about 5, my parents moved to a house in Malagash, Nova Scotia. My parents had a tendency of moving when I was younger, looking for cheap, easier houses to live in so they could raise me and my brother. It was a good-sized house for 2 adults and 2 kids. It had 2 floors and a basement, big enough kitchen for everyone to eat in, large living room for guest activities, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a basement was turned into a home gym. The house is roughly 150-ish years old. It was on an old farmhouse owned by my great-great-grandparents from my mother's side of the family. They lived there for, I want to say, 70 to 80 years. My great-great-grandparents both lived long lives. Many years went by and eventually my parents got the house. The house was in rough shape, many interiors and exterior issues that needed to be fixed for 2 parents to raise their kids in. My oldest memory of the house is being stuck behind a baby gate with my 2 to 3-year-old brother as my parents and the other people renovated the kitchen. Now, me being a kid, I never knew what was going on around me. I was curious about everything, but I can barely remember much from living there except being smacked with a Wii remote by my brother while playing Wii Sports. One memory I do have, however, and still remember clearly to this day, was seeing a tall man in my doorway. I was watching TV in my bed until I saw a dark figure. It was a larger man, almost looking like he was 6'6" to 6'8", wearing work boots that went up to his knees. The doorway was an 80-inch tall door, as all other doorways in the house were, and the figure stood from bottom to top of the door. Mind you, this was on Christmas Eve, so me being a kid I assumed it was Santa Claus but didn't say anything. I just glanced at my doorway as I was watching TV, looked back at the TV, looked at the doorway, and then no one was there. Years went by, about 4 or 5 years, and we moved out of the house. My parents said it was for my mum to be closer to her new job, and my dad was offered to work for the new school board instead of the one near Malagash. We moved to a small duplex, and it was a weird change, going from a 2-floor, 1-basement house to a smaller 2-floor duplex. Took some adjusting, but we managed. Many years go by and we moved from one location to the next. My parents had a hard time living in some places until we moved in with my grandmother on my dad's side after my grandfather passed away, and we still reside in this house today. A little bit after we moved in, my grandparents on my mum's side bought a piece of land. This has become our cottage spot where my family, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, and family friends all have a camper on, kind of like a home away from home as my family calls it. Well, one night, my parents got on the topic of the old Malagash house. As said earlier, my great-great-grandparents lived in that house. My great-great-grandfather passed away in that very place. He had an oddly peaceful death. He was falling ill but still managed to keep moving like he was not sick. One day he was at the dining room table drinking a cup of tea. He rested his head on the table, and as soon as he put his head down, he died. Almost suddenly, but easy way to go out, I suppose. As my family was talking about the old owners, they described my great-grandfather as a hard-working man. He was a very tall, pretty big guy, and he was known for wearing work boots, usually boots that went up to his knees. It wasn't until I heard that description that I had a flashback to that old memory. The memory of a man standing in the doorway. The man, as I saw, was a tall, large man wearing knee-high work boots. I'm still freaked out by this experience, as I never believed in ghosts until hearing my great-great-grandfather's description. Part of me wants to revisit the house and have fun with the ghost hunting equipment. Whether you think I could have seen something else, or it was my parents looking in at me, I still believe I saw him. As later finding out my parents believed that the house in Malagash was haunted due to strange and haunting occurrences that have happened. But those are stories for another day.
I once held a hunting lease in Middle Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place I've ever been to. I used to hunt there by myself quite a lot, but there was always this weird sense that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it was not uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. It was pretty creepy, but not exactly what this story is about. One evening, I was hunting down in a small valley by a food plot we put lining a creek that bordered the property. From the minute I sat down, I had this strange feeling, like I wasn't safe, even though I was holding a .308 with ballistic-tipped rounds. I didn't feel like I was the top predator out there. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting at the stand, but the forest was abuzz with activity. Birds, squirrels, other critters singing their normal evening symphony, when all of a sudden there was dead silence. Everything just stopped all at once, and it felt like everything in the woods was looking right at me. It was getting dark fast anyway, and I was extremely creeped out, so I packed up my gear and started the walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, though, I had this sudden feeling that something was coming up from behind me. Immediately, I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the path towards the food plot. That's when I saw it. There was something standing right in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything I'd seen before. There was hardly any light to make out their features, but it almost looked like some sort of bipedal deer or something. It was standing there, just staring at me. I quickly ran back to the cabin, packed all my things, and got out of there. I just let the lease run out, and never went back after that experience.
When I was a child of about 6, I would frequently hear something that still terrifies me to think about. I'd be laying in bed at night wide awake, and I'd distinctly hear 2 voices arguing. They were neither muffled nor distant. They were clear right somewhere in the house, like they were maybe in the next room or maybe outside my window. The male voice was loud and aggressive, repeatedly saying, "I'm going to end you." And then the female voice sounded desperate and frightened, and it would say, "No, leave me alone." I could hear the panic in her voice, the way she was pleading in an attempt to get away from him. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't having a nightmare. I wasn't hearing my parents. I wasn't hearing the TV. I heard it on a regular, recurring basis. It happened multiple times and always at night, and always when I was lying there in bed alone in the dark. I'd sit there frozen, trying to figure out where it was coming from, hoping it would stop. My parents swore it wasn't them. They said they never argued like that, never said anything like that. My mum would come into my room, check on me, tell me everything was fine, but I could tell that she was unsettled too. She'd close my door a little tighter, turn on a small light, and sit with me for a few minutes until I felt safe enough to fall asleep. Much later, my parents learned that a man had shot his mother in the house, before turning the gun on himself. The story came from someone who had lived there before us, or maybe a neighbor who remembered. They said it happened in the middle of the night. The man had been arguing with his mum, things got violent. Well, he took her life and then his own. We lived in that house for quite a while because the rent was so cheap. In hindsight, maybe that's one of the reasons. Even after they told me the story, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Those voices I heard, were they the man and his mum arguing right before it happened? Trapped in a loop within the house, replaying the same moment over and over? I never told anyone about it when I was little. I was honestly too scared and embarrassed. But now, years later, I still remember those voices. And I wonder if I was hearing something that I wasn't supposed to hear at all. It was definitely freaky. I have lived in quite a few haunted houses, some with their own resident ghost or spirit, and others that seem to have attached to me and move with me from house to house. My ex and I had 5 spirit children in our old house, 3 boys, 2 girls. 1 was attached to me, 2 seemed to already be there when we moved in, and 1 we brought home from the pub I managed, and 1 we rehomed from a friend's house because she was frightening their children. When my ex and I split up, and my son and I moved into my mum's house, the girls came with me. My mum, my son, and my partner have all experienced things because the girls like to cause mischief. The boys stayed at the old house, and we found that out because the new owners started asking us if we had ever experienced certain things. It was all the stuff boys used to do, so it was obvious they were still there. Luckily, once the new owners understood that the boys were neither nasty or evil, they were fine with their presence. My granddad Ken, who died 3 months before I was born, used to pop in sometimes and check on my son when he was a baby and toddler. We would hear my son talking to him, and Granddad would sometimes get things for him if he had thrown them out of his cot and couldn't reach them. My son has also seen his other granddad, who died when my son was 5. On occasion, we also see 2 of our old cats quite regularly, and can feel them jumping on the bed, laying down on it, and a couple of times they have even left fur behind because apparently they don't shed enough in life. I had never actually seen a ghost with my own eyes before, but on my birthday I did, and I'm still struggling to come to terms with it, and now she's in my house. My mum, dad, husband, and 2 sons ages 1 and 9 went to a casino resort for my 30th birthday for a good dinner and to play in the pool and arcade with my kiddos. We live in a little crappy town, so this place is the only nice place to go to around here, and I hadn't been in years. My husband, dad, and 9-year-old got into the men's locker room first, while my mum, 1-year-old, and I were still getting stuff out of my stroller. My boys were really quick, and my dad was already out and heading for the hot tub before we even got into the women's locker room. He texted my mum to hurry up as he was ready. So mum goes into the locker room first and goes straight to the restroom. Locker room layout. When entering from the hotel hall, you walk into a narrow, wet room with 3 showers on the left, followed by 3 sinks and mirrors. Then the hallway narrows, and there is the restroom followed by the door to the pool. I get into the locker room with the baby, and I hear my mum in the bathroom and go knock on the door. Door, not stall, it's actually a fully closed bathroom, and I leave the baby with her while I go get our showers warm. From here, time stands still. Okay, so now I'm alone at the stall closest to the sinks. I turn it to hot and wait for what feels like a really long time, and the water is ice cold, the coldest water I've ever felt. So I think, I'll try the middle shower. So I leave the first shower running and start the second, also ice cold. Then I see a lady walk in from the pool door. She has a work shirt on, and a towel over her arm. She tossed the towel into the dirty towel bin and went to wash her hands. I'm standing by the shower, just barely out of view of this woman washing her hands in the sink closest to me. And that's when I realize I can no longer hear my mum and son in the bathroom. I can't remember exactly what was going on, but in my mind it was a lot. I was shy due to being nude by a stranger, but not because it's a locker room. I just needed help getting warm water. But now I'm feeling sick and can't hear anything anymore. So I break the silence by saying, "Hey, not to be awkward, but could you please help me with the hot water?" And get no reply. I take 2 steps forward and she's not actually there. I feel like I stood there forever, and then my mum came out of the bathroom and it was so loud I instantly got a headache. I'm trying to decide what the actual hell just happened. I tell her I can't get the water hot, and she looks at it and feels it and said it's weird, because I had set it right. I walked towards the bathroom, ignoring my mum, hoping there was a utility door or something I didn't see that she might have gone in. No. I tell my mum I saw a ghost, and she says, "What? Tell me about it." I just feel so weird in there, like I shouldn't come out yet, so we played in the sink water. I asked how long we'd been in there, and she says 2 minutes, but it felt like at least 10. I'm trying to convince myself how crazy I am, and how I must have missed something. And then the room fills with steam and we panic and leave. So we go out to the pool area and I'm shaking and a little dizzy. I go to my husband in the hot tubs and he was facing the locker room door. I was nervous to even say anything because I felt crazy, so I asked him, "Did you see an employee walking out of the locker room?" He says no, he was watching and waiting for us, and asks why. I tell him the story. We enjoy the pool with the kids, and my partner takes the kids up to their room so we could have a bit of a good time and enjoy my golden birthday. We searched for the girl, or even just the uniform shirt on. But then I realized the uniform isn't one they use anymore. Has anyone else been contacted by a ghost on their birthday? I'm lost as to what to do about this, if anything.
Please hear me out. I'm a 15-year-old boy and by no means a writer. I've always been into scary stories and urban legends, and recently found out about this thing called BEKs, also known as the Black-Eyed Kids. When I read a few stories on them, they sounded quite terrifying, and they sounded pretty relevant to this encounter I had. For those of you who don't know what this legend is about, here's a little backstory. They're kids, usually teenagers, who will ask permission to come into your house or car, ask for a ride, or to use your phone. They don't seem to be able to enter without your permission. However, there have been some stories where people have been caught or followed by them out in the open at night. Their eyes are supposed to be completely black, and they bring along a feeling of fear and terror with them. Here's how the whole situation started out. It was the summer of 2012. I was 13, and me and 2 of my best friends were hanging out at my house that night. We decided to watch a bunch of movies late into the evening, but we wanted to get some candy. We told my parents we were going to the gas station, which was about a 5-minute walk away from my house. While we reached the final house on my street, just before turning to head toward the gas station, me and my immature friends decided to ding-dong ditch a house. If you don't know what that is, it's when you ring someone's doorbell, then run away and hide. We rang the doorbell once, and the owner opened the door and closed it. We decided we wanted a better reaction, though, so I rang the door for a second time. As I was running across the street, this huge sudden feeling of adrenaline took me over, and I had no idea why. After I dove into the bushes into my hiding spot, I repositioned myself to look at the house I'd just ding-dong ditched. This time the man came out and took a look around his yard. He began to cross the street towards us, but suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. I don't mean like a, I'll just deal with it later sort of stop either. Me and my friends were ready just in case we had to take off, but the man just started backing up and hurried back inside. We took this as an opportunity to leave and made our way over to the gas station. We spent a while there talking about what happened and how bizarre his reaction was. We bought some food and decided to head back to my house. On the way back, we saw a man walking towards us ever so slowly. He was wearing this winter coat and skinny jeans. Yes, a winter coat and jeans on a hot summer's night. He was pretty far from us because the path we were walking on was very long and straight. It was easy to see people coming from far away. By his height and build, he was too young to be the man we ding-dong ditched earlier. He was about our height, and judging from the fact he was wearing skinny jeans, he must have been around 15 or 17. He kinda had this eerie vibe about him. The hood of his coat hid his face. As he approached closer, I started to get more uneasy and anxious. I spotted a path we could take to the side and thought maybe we should just take that and find another way home. The path suddenly stopped after about 20 feet, and now we were behind a hill. We decided to hide behind it and let the creepy guy pass us by. I peeked up over the top of the hill to see if he'd passed yet. Instead, the man was just standing there, looking straight ahead. At that point, I realized it was quiet, too quiet. No cars were passing by, no crickets were chirping, just the breeze and my friends breathing in the air. I zoned out for a few seconds. Then, when I came back to reality, the man was still standing there and suddenly turned to look right at me. Fear shot through my body, and I was terrified. I've never been so terrified in my life. I had no idea why I was so scared either. I didn't even think about my friends. I just took off the other way and sprinted away from the man. To my luck, my friends followed. When we were a safe distance away, we decided to stop and catch our breath. I told them we could take a small tunnel that would let us loop around to my house. It was about a 15-minute walk. Eventually, we began going up my street. We tried to hide in the shadows to avoid being seen if the man was still around. When we were about halfway to my house, I felt that uneasy feeling again, and this time so did my friends as well. I turned around to see the same man following us, about 4 to 5 houses behind us. We had a good distance between us right now. I told my friends we were gonna try to lose him. We were gonna go to another house so he didn't find out exactly where I lived. Keep in mind, this was mainly because I didn't want to get in trouble. Right after I finished telling them the plan, I turned around to see he was almost 20 feet behind us. The fear and anxiety grew more and more the closer he got. There was no way he could have caught up to us that fast without sprinting. He couldn't have run to catch up to us because we didn't hear his footsteps at all. It was dead silent. We saw a car and thought maybe if we signaled it to stop, he might leave us alone, but the driver just sped right past us and ignored us completely. We were still wandering the neighborhood and finally came across a street with street lamps. As we passed under them, I turned around to see if I could make out the man's face. The split second he was under the light, I saw him clearly, and his eyes were pitch black. Right as I made a second of eye contact with him, I started to freak out. I started to breathe rapidly, and I could feel my eyes starting to water because I was so scared. A few moments after I turned around, I heard him speak. His voice was deep and emotionless, and he whispered, "Don't be causing trouble." That was it for me. I took off running home, and my friends followed close behind. When we got back to my house, we tried entering as calmly as we could. We immediately headed downstairs and turned on a comedy movie to calm down. We talked about what just happened, and my friends said they were scared the whole time too. The only thing I cannot shake from my head was just how terrified I was. Whether it was just some jerk messing with us or really a BEK, I'll never shake the feeling of terror I felt that night.
We were staying at my boyfriend's parents' house for a few months while they were overseas, and we were saving on rent. It was once a big, beautiful house, but his parents didn't have the time nor the funds to keep it up. The house was up a long, hilly driveway surrounded by trees, and the forest had been encroaching on the house for years. The roof needed to be replaced, the pipes needed to be replaced. It was such a shame that this beautiful home was so neglected. We had been talking about scraping up the cash to buy it off them and do it up ourselves until the incident. We had gotten a black Labrador puppy right before we moved in. Like most black Labrador puppies, he was adorable, an absolute bundle of energy. Unless he was passed out cold, he would literally vibrate at all times, constantly running around and tripping up your feet. Typical puppy stuff. One night I was walking upstairs to our bedroom, and the dog was running up and down the stairs as I walked. I had this weird feeling pass over me as I was walking, despite not trying to trip over the damn dog. It was like a cold brush across my skin, a sudden heaviness in the air. I got to the top and turned around. He had come to a dead stop at the bottom of the stairs and was staring up, not at me, but at the very middle of the staircase. This dog had not stopped jumping since the moment he was born, and had now come to a complete standstill and was staring at something that wasn't there. This really freaked me out. I was calling him, slapping my thighs and trying to get him to snap out of it. But it was like he was in a trance. His eyes were locked on that spot, unblinking and rigid. I finally ran down the stairs to pick him up. It wasn't until I took a step back up the stairs that he moved. He started trembling and let out the most pitiful, soul-crushing whine. It was the kind of sound that would make anyone's chest tighten. The sort of sound a dog makes when it's terrified beyond all reason. I sprinted back up the stairs and sent him down. He took off as fast as he could and hid under our bed. Now, being the huge skeptic that I am, I ignored the feeling in my guts that something was off and went to bed, muttering to my boyfriend about how stupid the dog was. I tried to convince myself it was just puppy weirdness, that he must be overstimulated or something, but I couldn't quite shake the feeling. We both woke up that night around 2 a.m. to a loud sound. I sat up groggily and asked my boyfriend what had happened. He didn't know, but he thought that a tree branch must have fallen on the house, so he opened the windows to look out. "That's funny," he said. "What?" "There's no wind, or clouds. It's a clear night." We pondered that for a moment. I didn't say anything to my boyfriend, but the feeling of unease that I had ignored earlier was now rising in my stomach, and was getting harder to ignore. "Holy crap," he whispered. I stared in disbelief. There was a bluish light, flashing outside the house. My first instinct was that someone was coming to rob us. After 5 or 4 flashes, the light vanished. I asked him in a low whisper if he thought it was a flashlight. He said he didn't think so. It was too bright and such a weird color of light. It wasn't the yellow-white of a normal flashlight. It was this strange electric blue. At that moment, the light flashed again, brighter and bluer. It illuminated our whole room for about a second, and I could see everything clearly, the furniture, the walls, my boyfriend's face, and then it stopped, and we were in total darkness again. Neither of us spoke for a second. We were both frozen, unsure what to do. The dog began to whine under the bed. I hadn't even noticed he'd gone back under there. It was the same low, sad whine from before. My boyfriend got down on his knees and began pulling the dog out. And that is when we heard the most terrifying noise I'd ever heard in all my life. The room down the hall from us had previously been his dad's office. They had taken their computer when they left, so all that remained in there were bookshelves and a few boxes and an old printer. This was not a new printer with wireless or Bluetooth capabilities. It was a cheap home printer that every family seemed to have in the early 2000s. As my boyfriend was pulling the dog from under the bed, we heard the telltale sign of the printer kicking to life, the sound of it warming up and clicking to prepare to print. We both leapt up and ran into the office. The printer was warming up. We heard it pull a sheet, and my boyfriend turned on the light. Sure enough, the printer was sat where it had been left. Only the plug had been awkwardly extended across the room, and it was plugged into the socket closest to us. There was no cord that should have reached that far. Someone had dragged it across the room, across the floor, and plugged it in. He reached over and ripped it out, and the printer died instantly. Without another word, we grabbed the still trembling dog and ran downstairs and got to his truck. We showed up at my boyfriend's best friend's house a few minutes later and told him we needed to spend the night. When he gave us a look, my boyfriend told him this was a no questions asked request. He shrugged, got us some blankets, and we went to sleep. We sat there in the dark for a while with the dog still trembling between us. We have never discussed this with anyone else, and we only discussed it with each other a few times in the days after. There was so much we couldn't rationally explain that we just dropped it. We didn't want to think about it too hard. We went back to the house the next day, grabbed our things, and told our parents the plumbing had finally given out, and we went to stay with them while we looked for someplace else. They didn't ask questions, and we never spent another night in that house. We never even talked about buying it. The idea of fixing it up, or making it our home, died that same night. I have two experiences. The first one happened one night when I was in middle school. I was the only one awake in my house. It was about 2 a.m., and I was in the basement on the computer. All the TVs were off, and I had no music or anything playing, so it was dead quiet. The silence was so thick that all I could hear was the hum of the computer and the faint noises of the house settling. When all of a sudden I heard a woman's voice at the top of my stairs by my bedroom door saying, "Hello?" I thought it was my mum, even though it sounded nothing like her. Her voice was softer and higher, and the way she said it sounded different, so I go, "Hello?" and heard nothing back. I waited a second, then went upstairs. I turned the corner to the stairs to see no one there, and everyone was still asleep. I checked the hallway, the living room, even the kitchen, and no one was up. I went back downstairs but couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. The second story happened when I was visiting my mum's side of the family down in Virginia. My aunt's mother was incredibly sick and about to die, so as awful as this sounds, we basically went down and just waited until she passed. It was a long, tense night. The house was quiet except for the occasional sound of people moving around or talking softly in another room. It was around 3 a.m., and my cousin and I were playing old video games when her parents came down and told us the news that her grandmother had passed. We went up to bed and talked for a little bit, and then finally turned off the light and went to bed. The room was dark and we were both exhausted, so we should have fallen asleep right away. But all of a sudden, it felt as if someone was in the room with us, watching. It wasn't a scary feeling exactly, but it was heavy, like something had changed in the air. And out of nowhere, I sat up in bed to see a black shadow standing in the corner of the room, waving at me. It wasn't a person, not exactly, more like a dark shape, unclear at the edges, but I could see it moving. It was waving slowly as if trying to get my attention. I stared at it for a good 10 minutes until I woke up my cousin, telling her that her grandmother was with us. I don't know how I knew it was her, but it was just this feeling like I recognized her somehow, even though I had never seen her like this before. She told me she felt nothing, she didn't see it or feel anything in the room. I tried to explain it to her, but she told me I was probably just dreaming or imagining things. It still freaks me out to this day just thinking about it. The way the shadow moved and it waved. I mean, I never told anyone else about it for a long time, and even now I'm not sure what to call it, but I know one thing for certain. I didn't make this up. It really happened. This was at least 15 years ago. The EVP is actually still on my old Galaxy phone, but I can't get it to work, so I don't have the actual EVP to upload. But I wanted to share my experience with you all the same. I was with my mum and sister. The botanical gardens are a really gorgeous property and huge. We rarely ran into any other visitors. It felt like we were alone most of the time we walked all the trails. I came across these wooden cabins on the property. There was one long, one small cabin that were both next to each other. If you go to the San Antonio Garden website, you can see pictures of the different cabins that are still there. I remember a plaque on display that said the cabins were from the 1800s and moved there from Fredericksburg, Texas. You're able to walk through the cabins and explore. I have an old ghost hunting documentary on DVD that was pretty decent. The ghost hunters being interviewed said if you ever want to catch an EVP, the best time to do it is when you first walk into a room. So as I was standing in front of a tiny cabin, I had my phone out recording audio and walked into the small front room that had a tiny fireplace and several doors leading out. The first thing I asked was, "Is there anyone here who would like to speak with me today?" I was completely alone in this small cabin, and my mom and sister were about 20 yards away looking at something else. I didn't hear anything at all as I was walking through the small one-bedroom cabin. Later that day at the hotel, I went back to listen to my audio recordings, and as clear as day, as if a man was standing next to me, after I had asked my question, the male voice said, "Shut up." I wish I could get my old phone turned back on so I could upload this recording, but just doesn't charge. It was honestly one of the freakiest things to hear back.
This story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it's the single most mind-boggling thing I have ever experienced. It's important to note that this happened in mid-December. I'm from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like, if you get stuck outside, you'll die kind of cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house, and even immediately outside of it as well. Me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring old winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home at the time. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. My friend and I thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live it up a little. We were sitting there opening up the first bottle when I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. Immediately, I thought, "Oh crap," and started looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then said, "I thought your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I heard a few heavy stompings and heard my mother call out, "Hello, anyone home?" I yelled back up the stairs, "Yeah, we're just hanging out in the basement." I could hear a few more steps moving from the garage door toward the stairs, and she called out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I replied back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, telling her to give me just a minute. There was about 20 seconds of silence before she asked if anybody was down there with me in a serious and concerned tone, a voice that sounded just slightly off from my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something was not right. She never cared if anyone was over, as our house was very open to all family and friends. The voice as well, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I just couldn't put my finger on. A bit weirded out, I replied back that it was just Colton. After I yelled back to her, I finally found a good place to stash that bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and this electric twinge in the air that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the garage door was, and also the kitchen right next to it. It was black, pitch black. All the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen area. "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. The electric twinge turned into full-on needles, and my adrenaline kicked in full force. I knew I had to get out of here as fast as possible. My mom was not home. I ran back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton said. "My mom's not home," I replied as fast as I could, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking to her." I could see the confusion in his face. I just told him we needed to leave right now. I took a few steps toward the back door that opened up to the yard. I could see my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something's wrong. I'm gonna call my mom and figure this out." I pulled out my phone and called her. She immediately picked up. "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there." I was hoping she was playing a joke on me. She said she was just leaving the bar right now. I filled her in on the whole story, and she rushed right home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she arrived. Before she did, though, we could clearly hear something upstairs. There was this weird pressure in the air as well, like a black hole slowly moving from one room to the next. The word I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel it leave just as quickly as it had come. Like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still never figured out what was going on. This is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us over the years, but it's the easiest one to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness to. My mother has passed away now, and I've moved away to Arizona, but whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what happened that night. I'll never truly know what it was, but I know that whatever it was, it had my mother's voice, and it was clearly a presence of evil.
My husband was on contract in Winnipeg, Manitoba, staying in long-term stay apartments next to the site of an old military fort. We'd heard stories from friends who had stayed previously, but my husband is a non-believer. I went to visit, and as I was laying there trying to overcome the time difference and go to sleep, I heard a sound, a quick, repeated tapping on the wooden headboard above my head, like someone trying to get my attention with their fingernail. Any time I sat up to figure out where it was coming from, it stopped immediately, and resumed as soon as my head hit the pillow again. It went on for hours, then it started to wake my husband up. I lay still as a stone, and when he raised his head to listen, it stopped. He was in a corner unit, 13 floors up. There was no one on either side of the wall, and it was minus 30 degrees C and too cold for birds. We even took the headboard off the wall the next morning to check for mice, but there was nothing we could see, no holes, just an exterior wall with a headboard. On the second night, we had the same issue. I was oscillating between feeling terrified and laughing about the ridiculousness. Finally, sleep deprived, I stomped into the room the next day while I was there alone, and my husband was at work. I basically acknowledged that we were in a shared space, but whatever was there with us could not be knocking on the goddamn headboard at 2 a.m. It never happened again, and I felt comfy and welcomed all the other times I visited. On my last departure, I jokingly stuck my head into the apartment and said, "Bye, ghost," halfway to the elevator. My husband and I both turned when we heard the door close and saw movement behind us. We thought it was his neighbor coming to say goodbye. I'm convinced it was my tapping ghost buddy, giving me one final farewell. Have you ever heard of St. Stephen's College in Stanley, Hong Kong? This historic campus was founded in 1903 and relocated in 1928. It's renowned not only for its European-style architecture and scenic coastal views, but also for its chilling wartime past, as well as the persistent ghost stories. During the Pacific War, the college was requisitioned by the British Army as an emergency hospital. On December 25, 1941, later remembered as Black Christmas, Japanese troops stormed the campus. Despite the Red Cross flag signaling a protected medical zone, the soldiers brutally killed dozens of wounded soldiers and even nurses inside the building. Survivors were forced to carry bloody corpses and mattresses outside, where they were burned on pyres of broken furniture. After the war, when the campus became part of Stanley Intermittent Camp, prisoners collected remaining bones and fragments and buried them at Stanley Cemetery. The campus still carries the very heavy weight of these events, with memorials and sculptures along the Heritage Trail reminding visitors of its painful past. But the terrors did not end with the war, because legends say that at night, the parade grounds echo with the sounds of marching. Janitors describe hearing orderly steps and hoarse commands late at night when no one's about, as if phantom soldiers are trapped eternally in drills from a time long ago. It is said that they can be heard between 2 and 3 in the morning, and any attempt to trace the origin of the sound will always lead to empty grounds. Some people try to rationalize it away as echoes amplified off the wooden structure, while others believe it is the remnants of those who lost their lives, replaying endlessly across the campus. Now, the dormitories also hold their own dark tales. Students have reported clothes and hangers moving on their own, as well as faucets turning on without anyone touching them, and eerie cries that can be heard echoing through the empty corridors at night. There have been times when students have woken up by hearing moans, and not those kind of moans either, but moans of pain and anguish. Many of them have had trouble falling back asleep after hearing it, and any attempt to investigate it makes the sound disappear into the night. Many believe these experiences are tied to the historical trauma of the campus. One of the most chilling features of the campus is the short path just over 100 meters long on the map, yet infamous among students for its strange disorienting effect. People report that time seems distorted. 5 minutes can feel like an hour, and streetlights illuminate the path endlessly, giving a sense of infinite distance. Witnesses have also described seeing a white-clad woman slowly approaching with her head bowed. Some feel a chill as her long hair brushes past their face. Others will report that this same figure will follow them before vanishing into the mist. No one knows where she came from or what's her story. Just another campus tragedy, a spirit unable to find rest. Whether these experiences are supernatural, or perhaps a combination of environmental, psychological, and historical factors remains uncertain. But all the same, St. Stephen's College is a fascinating and chilling place. For context, my property consists of 3 buildings: the main house in the front, the playhouse in the left corner, and the tiny house on the right corner which my sibling used to live in before they moved out. One thing you should know about me is that I have always been open to the paranormal and spiritual experiences, but I do not go out of my way to look for them. I'm a very logical and emotion-based person, which might seem confusing, but I am a very sensing person too. Yet I also want to give the people facts and logic and science in the most reasonable explanation possible. Finally, I'm a Pisces, and as someone who believes in astrology, I've heard many people say Pisces are more likely to see, hear, feel, and sense the paranormal. Well, in recent years, the upstairs of the tiny house has felt very often strange. I had never really thought much of it. I only remember the feeling of not being alone or being watched. I didn't start to actually suspect a ghost until about a week ago, when I brought it up with my best friend, who is also a Pisces. She and I often go up there for silence from the siblings in the main house, and I asked her out of the blue if she happened to feel the same, and she replied, honestly, yeah. We agreed that sometime in the future we would buy an Alice box to see if there really was something there. That very same day, I decided to take action and find out. Why not? I tried the old pencil cross trick but was left with nothing. So I got bored and decided to call my best friend to talk to her about it in more detail. After calling her, it went to voicemail. I thought she had accidentally hung up, so I messaged her, "Hey, why aren't you picking up?" She seemed very confused and said there was no missed call. We rubbed it off, and I proceeded to call her again. It instantly went to voicemail. The phone should have stayed on the line for a few rings before going to voicemail, but this was instant. The Wi-Fi was working fine, my mobile data was fine. I tried to find a logical answer by Googling it, but nothing was really clear. This was not the end of it though. An hour or so after, while I was still in the tiny house upstairs, I got a notification from my best friend. I opened messages to see a random bubble that read, "Questioned an image." I replied with 5 question marks. She seemed confused too. I scrolled up and there were no images to react to. I rubbed it off again just as a phone glitch because my phone had already been acting a bit weird. Later that night, I decided to see if calling her on Discord would work. I opened my laptop and we called for about an hour until we suddenly disconnected. I quickly checked my Wi-Fi and it was full bars. I looked back at the screen and it was frozen. I couldn't even turn it off. The screen began glitching and dark cubes started forming out of nowhere. Bear in mind this is a new laptop and I had never had a problem with it before this. I texted why she cut off and she replied, "Nah, that was you." At this point I started to freak out a little and wondered if there really was a supernatural force controlling the devices. I know there could be hundreds of other answers for my device being weird, but it's only when I'm upstairs in the tiny house. After the Discord call it was pretty late, maybe 10ish, and I was feeling uneasy, so I ran downstairs and left for the night. Fast forward 2 days and I installed this EVP Spirit Box app. I looked at the reviews and they all seemed promising. Of course, this is an app, so I had severely doubted anything would happen. But what the heck, why not? I opened my app, and it gave me a stats screen. The green meant no spirits were close to me, the orange meant approaching, and the red meant it was near you. The app also had a bar beneath the stats that gave vague prompts of what was happening. The beeping noise started at a regular rhythm. I said, "Hello, my name is Elias." Nothing happened. Then I said, "If there's a spirit or force in here, can you give me a sign?" The stats started spiking orange, the beeping got faster, and I heard a grumbling noise that I could not define what it said. All I heard was a muffled, "Oh." The rest was indistinguishable. I became a little scared, closed the app, and felt a very uneasy presence watching me. Despite all this, I was still suspicious. I know how naive I can get, so I did not fully accept the fact that there is a 99.9% chance a ghost upstairs until last night. It has been about 2 weeks since I tried anything with the occasional hellos and highs and goodbyes, and last night I was doing my homework up there for some peace. After I was done, I decided, why not open this Spirit Box app again? When I opened it, the stats had already started in a yellowish color. The beats were steady, and I started asking questions. "Hi, my name is Elias. Are you in the room with me?" The beeping grew a bit faster, and I stared down at the now orange stats. I took it as a yes. I asked, "Could you please come closer?" And I watched the screen in silence as the static filled the room, and the stats kept growing about every 10 seconds. The beeping became louder and louder, and the stats were jolting up. My heart began racing. I was not sure why. I quickly snapped a screenshot for evidence to show my friends later. Then the little box beneath the stats said, "Behind." I began to panic and freeze in silence, staring at the screen. I shut off my laptop, showing the stats, and sat there. "Please give me some space," I said aloud, and started to head downstairs before closing. I said goodbye out of respect, and I'm pretty positive there's a ghost upstairs. Should I burn some sage or something? Maybe give it an offering?
This is a true story. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house. I was probably 10 or 11 years old at this time. One night I was sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly woke up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother soundly snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the home, around a corner, past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right-hand side. After I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch once more and saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off all on its own. Finally, it completely shut off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size, crouched low to the floor. At this point, I was frozen to the spot as my mind began realizing that no one else was home except for my mom and myself. Whatever this white shape was, it began whispering quietly in a man's voice, "Help me, I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't. Instead, I barely managed to get out a no. All of a sudden, the thing started running at me on all fours. I quickly sprinted through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother and shaking her awake. I remember just screaming, "It's coming! It's coming!" My mother's eyes went from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on. I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering that scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into my room and slammed the door. She held me in her arms with her back pressed against it as we listened. It sounded like whatever this thing was, it was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and then slammed shut at some point. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town over for a while and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones, each belonging to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream like that. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it and will come back someday if she does. This is just one of many weird things that have happened in my life.
Growing up in this house, I have always told my parents since childhood, there is an old lady apparition who is blue in color with white hair that I've encountered seeing or heard tampering with objects, but when I went to investigate, nothing would ever be moved around. She wasn't what you would say a nice presence. I always looked at her distorted face whenever I could see her. Well, throughout the years, becoming old enough to be left home alone, this lady would make her presence known to me in the house. When my parents were out of town, I had friends sleep over, and I told them what happened when my parents weren't around. that I'd hear banging coming from the basement. Not the furnace or anything sounding like that. It was like banging on hardwood or window glass pounding. The lights flickered. The room temperature changed and got cold. Doors slammed, and my sister's cross from her casket I had come abruptly dropping off the wall, and there was a creaking from the box spring of the bed like someone was moving on it. My friend witnessed all of this. We were petrified and scared that night. It was insane. We were shaking and panicked, and we called her parents in the middle of the night to come and collect us. We left my house and went to hers instead. I called my parents the next morning and told them everything that happened, and my dad said, "So you just heard banging from the basement, and your sister's cross fell off the wall, and bed rolling?" My dad went and got a security camera for the house put in. But those were the days when motion was the security trigger, and they didn't really have any video for home security. Fast forward a few years. I haven't lived in the house in years, so I get these pictures sent from my dad. All that it says is haunted house. He said he was playing with the guitar he bought, then saw something go from one corner of his eye towards the other side of the dining room. He said he stopped playing and felt the need to take pictures. I looked at it, and he asked if I saw the old lady in the guitar. I actually started laughing and messaged him back, "That's the old lady I was always telling you about." Then he noticed my great-great-grandparents' photo on the wall behind. There was a third person suddenly in it. "Did you notice the first person in the picture? Does it look like anyone you know?" My dad said, "Looks like your great-grandfather, which is my father's father that died when he was 13. So my dad was messed up about all of this. He put his guitar back online for sale. I've shown him and told him more things I've experienced before and since, even up to present, and he stops questioning my experiences. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed tonight's collection of scary stories, and if you did, you can let me know down below in the usual way. If you're only just joining us for Paranormal Week, check out the rest of the week. We've had an awesome collection of stories, and if you're wondering about Blue Spooky, he is an amazing creator and has been on the platform for a little bit longer than I have, I believe. Sadly, he was one of those affected in the YouTube demonetization wave. Recently got his monetization back though, thanks to a big community effort and the push which I helped organize. So it would mean a lot if you went over to check out some of his work too. Links will be on screen shortly and down below. I'd like to give one final thank you to our amazing members and patrons whose names you can see on screen for all their continued support. It really does mean a hell of a lot and goes a long way. I'll be back tomorrow with some haunted wood stories. They are going to be brilliant, so be sure not to miss it. And that's it from me. Stay awesome, and good night.